Hi, my name is Ashraf Ram, and I am joined by Abdullah Koker, and we are the co-hosts of the podcast, The Second Curve. And essentially, this podcast focuses on the second curve of learning that people often go through in their career, along with stories and experiences that shaped who they are today. Our goal is to make and take these stories and share them, along with uncovering what the next big thing will be in their industry.
All right, in today's episode, we're joined by Suresh. How's it going?
Doing well. Thank you both for having me.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I think let's just jump right into the episode, and if you could just tell us like a quick 1-2 minute synopsis of who you are and what you do.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Suresh Manian. I'm a entrepreneur and engineer. I currently am the CTO of a residential home services business called Snowsurance. I'm also the founder of a AI education platform known as Arogya. In my past, I've been building for like the past decade. My undergraduate degree was in CS and physics from Carnegie Mellon. I then went and worked at Phillips Healthcare for about 4 years. I started as a software engineer working on embedded software for ultrasound machines and moved my way up to project management. So not much software. And then I went back to school, got my master's of science in artificial intelligence from Northeastern. And ever since then, I've just been in the startup world. So that brings me to now, right? I think that's sufficient for this purpose, but I'm excited to be speaking to you both in detail about entrepreneurship, business, AI, just everything, right?
Absolutely, yeah. That's a great. You're great to hear. Is a quick synopsis, and I just want to focus on the first part of that. You said you majored in physics and minored in CS at Carnegie Mellon, and I was just curious. Out of all of the things you could pursue, what drew you to that?
Yeah, okay. So the appeal to me was math and science growing up have always been my strong suits. But more than that, I've always been very curious about the world. I think as many of us are when we're starting out. But for me, I've always just been obsessed with like why things are the way they are, how things work. So science naturally just called to me. I actually started off as a chemistry major, though, believe it or not. And so now this gets to the second half of my answer is that I had no clue what I wanted to do. Truthfully, I was lost. But not in a bad way. It was more of I wanted to keep my options open because that feels a little bit safe and comfortable in the beginning. And that's also where physics found a natural standpoint. It was both something that allowed me to explore, my curiosity for the world and the universe and so on. But it also had a lot of practical application. So I felt safe and secure in being able to do a number of things beyond it, just in general, right? At that time, I was heavily debating between science and engineering. So physics also offered a number of additional overlaps between engineering itself, and I found a natural home. I will say, though, on the topic of physics, I feel like I quite literally ripped my hair out going through physics, where it may not have been necessary. But I do think it's, especially with what we're seeing today with just AI in general, having a really like a experimental first principles, just a mindset focused on why things are the way they are is a huge asset. I answered more than what you asked, but that's why physics.
Yeah, very interesting. I think a lot of people like don't go like I feel like physics is like, a unique, standpoint like when you're going into like, maybe picking out like what you're interested in. I feel like a lot of people think, physics is not like, that super interesting like when they look at it at first, but like it's very unique that you like it a lot. And I just wanted to ask like why did you like go back to studying your masters and stuff after you worked? Like what was the reasoning behind that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm just going to touch on physics one last time and then I'll get to my master's. One thing that you may not be aware of is that physics naturally tends itself to a number of different careers. So you'll for some reason or another, physics is a natural career path for people that want to go into finance, computational finance. So there's a lot of physics majors out in the world that are doing nothing related to actual physics. And then the other physics path is grad school, PhD, yeah. Right. Okay. Reason for my master's. At the time when I was considering my master's, I was a technical project manager at Phillips Healthcare. And the project that I was working on was a AI heavy mobile ultrasound device. Right? And so as an engineer, I felt that I had understanding of AI, but I was lacking sort of the practical education and also just like a deeper more structured knowledge of it. So I was already curious in like, what's the best way to learn more about artificial intelligence in general? Also noting that it's a massive field. So like, what should I even learn? So, and the other factor was, it was the middle of the pandemic when all this was going down. So I took that opportunity to go back, get my master's, gain a wider understanding of artificial intelligence. And it also gave me a way to like connect with the world when we were all being trapped in our rooms. I think the master's was also alluring to me because I've been working for about 4 years and I just had that itch to do something new. And it was a way that I was able to do both at the same time, work, but also start my master's. And the last thing, I know I'm just listing things now, but a lot of companies will actually provide stipends, or they'll help you pay for your education if you do it while you're working, which is what I did. I started off with my master's. My company was helping pay for it. And then maybe this is leading, but I decided to leave my company while I started my master's. Anyhow, there's a number of forces that sort of just pushed me towards getting the master's while I was still working.
Right. Yeah. I have heard a lot of that, like where a company will give stipends for a master's, so you can kind of forward your career, learn more in whatever field is interesting. A lot of times people do like MBAs and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great way to upskill, and it's covered by your company. It's almost a no-brainer. You lose a lot of time because 9 to 5, and then your degree afterwards. But it's a great option for many people.
Yeah, definitely. I think just having that continuous learning, especially like as you said, like you want to like look into more of like AI and how that works, because you didn't have that good understanding of it. I think having that continuous education is really important. Abdullah, do you have anything else to say about that sort of topic?
Right. I think that leads into like something that we'll probably touch on a lot later as well, where like to succeed in a lot of different fields and a lot of different areas, or even like people could argue in life in general, you need to be seeking knowledge and you need to be kind of proactive in that sense. So if there's an opportunity like that which presents itself, it's great to take that opportunity and learn more about whatever's new.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I was interested because I remember when we were talking earlier, you mentioned how you left your corporate job, right? After, and even now you mentioned you left, and I just wanted to ask what motivated you to leave, right? Because like it's also decently, I'm going to make an assumption, decently earlier in your career, right? In your
yeah. I mean, I left. Started career at 21. I left my job at 25, and
exactly
a full-time job since.
Yeah. So I want to, I just have a few questions. First of all, like what motivated you? Second of all, were there any risks? Like, were you was there something to fall back on? Like, did you have a backup plan? And how long did you consider?
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, all right. I'll go first. Okay. I probably, I had been thinking about it for maybe 6 months before I actually left. So I was pondering on it, but the truth is I wanted to do it for years. It didn't come to the forefront and be like, all right, I'm going to do this thing. So about 6 months was when I was like in planning mode, like, all right, what steps am I going to take? Cause I'm going to do this. I'm going to leave. I think it's funny. It's not being mean to my employer or anything. I love my employer, my previous manager, and all those things. But I'd actually put in my 2 weeks notice, but then continued for another 3 months and then put in my notice again. And then I get to that later, but it just to me, it just showed like how like I put so much thought into this decision, but it was also just so simple and easy to actually do. Right. And yeah, it goes both ways. So 6 months was the amount of time I actually was like, all right, I'm doing this. Let's make it happen. Okay. Now, why did I do it? At that time, honestly, there's a whole list of things. I wanted something new because I've been doing the same thing over and over again. I didn't like that. It made me feel uncomfortable. Frankly, I was also a little bit fed up with the whole, after the pandemic, just being locked in, just working. And I needed a change of pace. But it was more than that. The things that led me to this that I had already been dealing with for a number of years. One was how slow companies move. Now, this is true for any sizable company, but it's even more so in healthcare because of regulations. It's not bad that it is slow, but it's you want to recognize it is slow. And I'm not sure if I can even fully convey to you both how slow it is. From an engineering perspective, as a software developer, you probably spend about 10 to 20% of your time actually writing code. And then the other 80% is reviews,
Oh, wow.
discussions, meetings, and it's actually there's more because I've like honestly blocked out a lot of the stuff that was problematic at the time. So yeah, I mean it was a whole swarm of things. It was things were moving too slow. I was fed up because of the pandemic, and then this one it's a bit more inflammatory, but I'm gonna just say it. But truly, no one will value your effort, your trajectory, your career more than yourself. And in fact, it's almost this is a reductionary, a reductionist way of describing a company, but it's almost the company's goal to limit your work. It's like your company is there to set the minimum value that you'd be willing to do the job. It's not that their company's not looking out for you, providing you benefits, providing increases on your salary year after year, but by the nature of it being a business, the company is optimizing itself so that you will do a certain amount of work for the value that they're willing to provide. And your ability to grow is so much greater outside of it. And that was my understanding at that time based off of my peers and people around me that were developing themselves. And I just didn't see a path for me to grow the way I wanted to while being in any company, period. Let alone the one that I was already in. So that's kind of why. And then I skipped the second one.
If you had a fallback, did you have a plan B?
Yeah.
Fallback. Yeah.
I mean, truthfully, yeah, I did. When I quit, I still had my master's. That's what I was doing part-time. It wasn't financial fallback, but it was more of like a reputational fallback in some ways, right? That gave me comfort. I also, because it had been 4 years of me working, I'd saved up a decent amount. Also, because of the pandemic, I moved back home, saved a whole bunch on rent. And then I had also invested in some real estate. And so at the time, I wouldn't have called it a fallback because it was like net zero in terms of what I was getting out and what I was putting in. But over time, that did develop into a sort of fallback. It to help me sustain for a number of years. Yeah, hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It's just a cool look into like what led you to that decision and the circumstances around it. I think it's the one point you made about the companies trying to like minimize because it is optimized, right? They realistically want you to pay.
Right. And it's not intentional. It's just the nature of the game.
It's
right? Like they can't just compensate everyone. They got to compensate the highest performers the most. But if you overcompensate, then the company's losing. It's a balance that just comes out, and you kind of have to live with it. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
leave it.
Yeah, very very interesting points. And like as you said, you had switched to like your corporate life to starting a business and all of that. We're going to talk about, entrepreneurship and AI much later, but I want to like go into the first and second curve as you have stated here. But I want to ask, like, is there any things that you had to unlearn? Like that's, shifting from that first to second curve. Did you have to unlearn anything? Did your, lifestyle change? I know you touched upon it, but can you reemphasize, that part for the viewers?
Yeah. And so just to make sure I answer your questions, you're looking at first curve being corporate life, second curve being entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
What did I have to unlearn or change to make that work? Okay. Yeah. A number of things had to be unlearned. But luckily for me, even 4 years, while it sounds like a lot, is a rather short time. So to me, it didn't feel like unlearning. It felt more like selectively keeping than unlearning. And I do think that's important because I don't know if my vibe tells you this, but there was a lot of takeaways that I had from corporate world that I wanted to keep going forward. Right. And yeah, now I can touch on that. Things to unlearn, though, sort of the speed of how things work. In my mind, I had sort of adopted like an acceptable way for an outcome of either development, spending my time, whatever that was. I had to unlearn all of that. So as an entrepreneur, you're constantly pushed like the status quo, whether it be your efficiency, how you do things, even like what's acceptable to be done. Forget everything that another company was doing. It's not what you want to do. So specifics. I unlearned sort of the needs of communication. In a corporate world, you got to like over communicate, which is helpful. But like if me and a team just need to build a feature, I can just message the guy who's working on it and ask him to do it. I don't need to host a meeting, show him like a sprint plan. This is our burn down. Story points. Yeah, you don't need any of that, right? Just focused on the end result. That was one unlearning. I think another one was like in the corporate world, you learn how important it is to be detail oriented, which I think is valuable. But in the startup world, sort of frequency matters more than detail. It's sad to say, but like if you do something enough times, even if it's like random changes, iteration, you have a better chance of success than doing it perfectly by whatever definition of perfect is. But in a corporate world is very much the opposite. Your aim is perfection, not iteration. So that was another one. I think, honestly, I think more on like for my second curve, how I lived my life was a bigger deal. Really just trimming all of the fat. Subscriptions gone. Some period of time rent was gone. Went back and lived with my family. Got rid of sold my car and figured out a way to manage without a car. Because without a car, you don't have car insurance. And then it's just all cars are a huge liability. You save a lot by not having a car. It wasn't fun, but I made it work. Yeah. What else is there? I feel like I take it for granted. I got rid of a gym membership for a bit, just working at home. Yeah, just anything that was going to cost me monthly. I was like, how do I get rid of this? How do I get rid of this? And actually, right after I left Phillips, grad school aside, I had found a way to reduce my monthly expenses to about $300 per month. And I actually kept it that way for the next 2 years. So my annual spending was like $4,000.
That's
which is people don't believe me until I show them, and yeah, it is. And I mean, it wasn't pleasant. I had to leverage the people around me. I had to really trim the fat, but it allowed me to be in that ugly phase of when you're starting out for a longer period of time, which I think was critical to my where I am now. Right. Yeah. I wish I could tell you more about unlearning. I actually, sitting here now with you, I feel like I don't even remember what I kicked out of my brain.
That means you unlearned it the best.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think that the takeaway, though, from first to second curve, corporate to entrepreneurship, is just the ways of working don't need to be that way. There's a whole rhyme and reason to corporate life, the structure that's in place. Entrepreneurship doesn't care about any of that. In fact, entrepreneurship is like throw paint on a wall, and corporation is like etching a circuit. Yeah, you just don't worry about any of this is how it works. None of that matters.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it as well, like detail oriented versus iteration, because you can't have that many iterations in a corporate world when you have to go through 17 reviews and meetings, right? It would take you 7 months to implement something, let alone 3 times over. While in a kind of startup situation, you can just iterate as much as you want.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's at the core of it, in my opinion, right? Like, how many experiments can you run on a daily basis to give yourself the best chance of succeeding? And again, it's also those approvals are really where it slows it down. But companies also, they add another layer, which is the social dynamic. I don't know if this has come up in your previous interviews, but it plays a massive role at corporations. Companies are sort of they have hierarchies no different than any other structure, and how you present yourself socially makes a huge difference. So in a corporate environment, it's no longer how do we just succeed as a team, period. How do we just beat our competitors, period. No, it's how does each individual appear in relation to everyone else in that company. And individuals will act in a way to promote themselves because they're after their own salaries, bonuses, raises, whatever, right? So the best companies prevent this from turning into a negative workplace culture. But the reality is that in that environment, the people in a company compete with themselves, with each other, unless the managers, the higher ups go out of their way to ensure that incentives are not internal. The natural progression is you're competing with your peers. Yeah, it can motivate work, but more times than not, at least from what I saw, it prevents you from getting anywhere fast.
Yeah, definitely. Very, very cool, very interesting points. And I wanted to go into more of your entrepreneurship mindset after you thought corporate wasn't that good, and you thought entrepreneurship was better, as you mentioned your takeaways. Was there a specific win or moment that made you realize that you were on the right track? So you said you didn't spend that much, your annual budget was around 4,000, but in that time or maybe after that, was there any instances where you knew you were on the right track and you knew that entrepreneurship was the right thing for you?
I think even before that, if you could just give into an insight, when you were cutting down, when you're in that ugly state, right, as you said, I kind of want to hear about that first experience, or maybe first idea, first venture that you pursued, or maybe you pursued multiple, and what you learned from that. And then bouncing off of that, was there a moment where it's Okay, you know, like we're getting some.
Okay. I'm going to answer it, but I think it's going to come in I mean, I've been expecting this. So my first moment about like validation or feeling like, hey, this can actually work was actually in high school. And I know it's backwards, right? So most of my confidence to leave and go start something actually came from high school. So my first business was a electronics repair business in high school. Like I said, I started with a $30 budget, fixed someone's phone, a friend's phone, because she broke her phone. I got paid for it. I realized it wasn't that hard, and I just rinse and repeat. And it never grew to anything massive or big, but I reached a point. I did this for about a year and a half, 2 years from what I remember in high school. It bled into college, but at peak, I think I was doing like 50 or so devices a month for a short period. And for me, that was a huge morale boost, a huge understanding of the world. One, because the business was so simple, but the other was it like because of who I was and where I was, meaning because I was in a high school environment with kids who kept breaking their phones, I was able to run a business. And to me, that was the aha moment. It was like, if a 40-year-old man who replaced me with a 40-year-old man, he wouldn't have had access to my customers the way that I did.
Exactly.
And I picked up on that. I was like, okay, you can run a business of any scale at any point in time, and it doesn't have to be glorious or fancy. And that gave me a lot of also confidence in my own ability to earn or to build or to create. And I carried this forward, post high school into college. I've worked jobs every summer, some with my hands, some as a software engineer. But to me, it was, I can go out and create, and I don't really need much to do it. Right. That was the first moment.
Yeah, only $30 budget.
Yeah. Like I said, $30 business. I didn't even have an Amazon account. I was like, Dad, I just want to buy this screen. And then it showed up. And also, because I was so early and so young, and this is the point I actually really wanted to put out there, I had zero risk at that point. Right. Like even if I didn't have the $20, which I did, even if I didn't, to ask $20 from my parents, that's a no-brainer. Worst case risk is that person's broken phone remains broken, still fine. And I'm still in school, like I didn't take any risks.
Yeah.
Frankly, I took zero. So the best time to start is when you're in school, when you're young, before you have like real liabilities or like real bills you got to pay. Start then. Okay. What was your other question?
I think because I in my mind, I was imagining that you would have like one or two ventures that you started off with. And then at some point, there was a point where it's like, okay, this is getting somewhere. It's funny that it's backwards.
Yeah.
I still would want to hear about like what was because I'm sure there was a lot to learn going into that. Even if you had like the high school experience prior, there's now other things, like other factors in play. So I just wanted to hear about that and maybe things you had to learn and experiences.
Yeah. All right, so it makes sense. So now shifting, a number of years forward, that company that I decided to leave Phillips for to start had to do with 3D printing. So I had a lot of interest in 3D printing. So and it also felt like it was a field that was on the rise. Not many other players. This is how I was thinking back then. I don't recommend thinking like this for any business. It's actually kind of the flip. Look where there's more business, more players. It's actually a good thing to follow. So, okay, to me, it felt like new category. I had a lot of personal interest with 3D printing and 3D modeling. I also had managed to collect 3 other people who were interested in working on this thing with me. They were all working full time, but I still had assembled a bit of a team. And so that was enough for me to say, hey, I'm going to go out and start on this. Like that was it. No other initial customers, no other nothing. I was just like, I'm done. I'm going to leave. I'm doing my master's part-time. And then this is the first thing I'm going to try and build and work on. Now, at that time, I felt like what's weird is that while maybe I had a successful business before, that was the one that I treated like, okay, this is a startup. I'm going to build this thing like a startup. And I think that mindset led to many mistakes. So the thing that first I was initially was like, okay, I got to make sure everybody knows what I'm doing. And, is like, okay, I'm going to go and create a Facebook group, or I'm going to go publicly show it. None of that mattered. I was like, okay, I'm trying to build this. Oh, I didn't tell you what it was. It was a company called Kryoko. The whole premise was just a 3D printing marketplace like Etsy, but it had a bunch of tools so that you could go and modify that thing that you wanted to print for yourself. So it's Etsy with some customization.
Right.
Yeah. I do think there's players like that now, but this was like 5 or so years ago. Yeah. I made a whole bunch of mistakes. I cared more about what other people thought of me. So I was like, all right, I got to get this landing page up. I got to like let people know that I'm a player. I know what I'm doing. I spent time building my own 3D printer because I thought it would help. me build my impression in the field. Yeah, wasted a whole bunch of time focusing on things that had nothing to do with the business itself. That was one mistake. At that time, also, I had very little knowledge or awareness about the concept of raising funds or the progression of startups, like what any of that meant. So pre-seed, seed, Series A, Series B, Series C, Series D. So my mind was very much like locked into doing everything in the stereotypical startup way instead of just running a business like I did in high school. So that startup was a complete failure. A lot of time was spent. The team sort of lost focus. Like I said, because we were wasting time on things that didn't even matter, we never really gained traction. The team just split up. It didn't lead anywhere. Right? That's the truth of it. The next one, I was like, okay, I don't want this to happen again. So after a few month period, I went and we started another one that had to do with healthy food or healthy decisions for like while you're eating. And we decided to narrow that to be in restaurants, in a place where we felt that it was focused enough that I can narrow the problem somewhere. So I have a target customer, target market, but it was also like broad enough that there was enough for us to do. So this was similar. I repeated those same steps, got a team together. We're going to build it. And this time I was like, okay, we're not going to get caught doing a bunch of things that mean nothing. Let's join and accelerate. So we joined this thing called Build 18 as part of CMU. It was like a 8-week program. We're in there with a bunch of other startups. We have mentors. We're crunching along. We're building this thing. I've got like a designer. I've got a tech guy. I've got myself. We were finally moving in the right direction. We had initial users. We did about 100 user interviews. All that was good. And we won best pitch at the end of, it was, you can call it incubator. Yeah. And so traction was all great. And then we sit down to build our product out beyond the initial MVP. And then this is where I ran into team challenges. You can boil it down to drama, whatever you want to call it. But I learned firsthand what happens if like your team is either not aligned or like, I don't even want to say this type of stuff online. It's like, it was immature. It didn't need to happen, but this team fell apart. So in many ways fixed a lot of the problems, or I fixed a lot of problems from the first one. I only focused on what really mattered. I was talking to restaurants in person, right? I was talking to the customer, dealing with the customer. No more of this nonsensical, like, this is what people think of me type of stuff. No, I don't care what you think of me. I'm just going to focus on the customer. But again, I failed with the team. And like, personally, you have to sort of put yourself in my shoes. After the first one, to fail or flounder in a similar way with the second one was a hit. I didn't know what to tell people, and that bothered me. And so I had to really just take a step back. I was like, God, 2 of these down now. I am really struggling, not making any more money at this point in time in my career. Made my family agree to my choices, and now they're witnessing the results of my choices. That was just not pleasant in any way. So now this leads to this third one. I know I'm just ranting and telling you my story. I knew I needed to get back to basics, just making money. So at this point, it's like, all right, screw startups. How can I just make money doing the same thing that I'm doing for the startups? So I went small business to small business, like farms, HOAs, and I just started selling them software. Like, hey, I can build X, Y, and Z for you. And I was actually able to pick up a few clients. So in a short period of about 3 months, I picked up about 3 different clients, built them a few small pieces of software. And the goal here is generate revenue the way I did with my first small business, but also hopefully in the process of doing this, I was hoping that I could find SaaS ideas or products that I could then scale up, right? Like if I could get one customer in a small business to pay me for something, which they did, then I was thinking, hey, I could probably at least try to sell this to other small businesses like this one. And that was the whole approach. And it worked so much better than my previous 2, right? Well, I actually made money. Okay, I'm going to keep going, but are there questions or like?
Yeah, I'm curious. Like, did you after like the first one not working out and the second one also not working out, did you doubt if it was for you, like if it was going to work?
I didn't doubt it, and I think it. All right, answer is no. I never doubted myself. It was more of like, what the hell am I doing wrong? Because I know I could run a business. I did it when I was much younger,
right?
And then the other side of it was like, it was almost like I'll be honest, it wasn't the doubt, it was the shame. right? It was like, I failed twice. Jesus, like, what am I doing? People are going to look at me and think I'm like incapable. It was the shame. That's what bothered me. It wasn't the doubt. And that, for example, like, I was willing and wanted to keep going. So it was never, I can't do this. It was like, shit, people are going to like look at me and be like, what have you been doing with your life? I spent you spent a few $100,000 for me to go get an undergraduate degree, only for me to leave a career that probably, I could have built a very happy life around, and then fail and not produce any revenue for multiple years on 2 different businesses, right?
And how'd you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean,
If you dealt with it.
no, I did deal with it. It just wasn't. Yeah, I honestly, I don't know if I can say anything besides just sitting with it. Like many things in life, the longer you just sit with it, the easier it gets, or the more your body is used to it. Like, this is a terrible example, but like, if you've never been exposed to the cold, the first time you're in the cold, you're going to freak out and it's not going to work and you're going to keep getting upset. Yeah, whatever. But the longer you sit with it, it's like, okay, I know what this is. That's truly what happened. I just sat with it longer. I don't think the underlying factors really changed, but now I just don't care as much and I just keep going. Yeah. that's the truth.
Yeah, it's like a cold shower.
Yeah, exactly. You keep taking a cold shower and eventually it's like, hey, I want to take that cold shower.
Not bad,
yeah, right. That was it. And then also, truthfully, getting a win by actually generating revenue, that also helps you deal with it.
I don't know if Asha, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's very. I mean, the two first startups that like didn't work out. I feel like a lot of people just quit like after that. Like people just will go back into like corporate life or something. But very interesting that you stayed with that track and then went actually like got and generated revenue and still went on. And we want to ask like what are you just for the viewers, what are you focusing on right now? What businesses are you focusing on? Could you give like some descriptions of those?
Yeah, if you want to, you could like quickly finish up.
I think. Well, actually, I think it's the perfect transition.
Okay, great.
There's gonna be a lot of gaps because I've done a number of things, but this transition is nice. So, what I'm doing now is I'm building the technical or digital infrastructure for this company called Snowsurance. We offer it's like residential home services, which for the moment means snow removal in the winter and landscaping in the summer. But the way I ended up here, because this is very much a small to medium sized business, right? It's not nationwide. It exists in Boston. But the way that I ended up here was through that previous venture. When I was going out and just trying to sell myself and just trying to find businesses that I could help build with, I came across this Snowsurance. It's actually, the story is even more convoluted because I initially sold them on NFTs to build these guys NFTs, which I can tell you more about this story later. But if so, whatever, come full circle, I end up helping these guys build their businesses as a contractor. And then years later, there's an opportunity for me to join them as a partner in their business. So one thing led me to another, which is an important thing. You never know how your work or actions will or where they'll take you, but you just keep acting and eventually it'll take you somewhere. So in Snowsurance right now, like I said, we operate out of Boston. My task or initiative is to build out a whole bunch of digital infrastructure with AI as sort of the bedrock. And we are, this will be the first year we're running with that infrastructure, but we're going to have the groundwork to scale and run the business that was previously being done with mostly humans, now assisted with AI and at a much larger scale, right? So that's the majority of my focus. And it's so fulfilling because it's in a phase where you just have to build the things you know how to build, right? And that's a really good feeling as an engineer. It's not like figuring out what's going to work, trying to design this concept and get people to use it. No, we already have people using it. I already know what to build. It's a really fun environment to be in. And we're doing all sorts of stuff. It's at a startup level, but with a business that's already generating a whole lot of money, right? So it's kind of like it gave me the best of both worlds. And what I mean by startup level is there's no sense of approvals. There's no sense of like moving slowly. We're moving very fast. And everything that we're building is one, using AI to build it. So we leverage Gen AI. And also we are building it in a very AI friendly way. That has a lot of meaning to it. But right now it mainly just means that everything that we build is like in code. Like infrastructure is an important thing. Having servers, web servers, file servers, security, load balancers. That's like, these are concepts that come up when you host your own your infrastructure, but we build all of that with code. So it's not like I'm going to a web browser and configuring things. It's a config file generated by AI that goes and deploys our infrastructure. Yeah. So it's all written by code or written by AI for AI. And it's a whole lot of fun. The second thing that I'm doing is it's a company called Arogya. And this just sort of comes from both my passion, but also just what I've been observing around the world. Education is an equalizer, in my opinion, and AI helps promote it in an equitable way. The challenge now is using it safely and in a way that actually is productive. So like helps you earn money, helps you build a business, right? And that's what Arogya is all about. It's to help educate people on how to use AI, both safely and productively. And I'm also just really just trying to push business and entrepreneurship while I do that to a younger demographic. So I target this towards high schoolers. I'm pushing entrepreneurship and I'm pushing, safe usage of AI. And I'm happy to answer more questions about it, but that's really what I'm working on.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I think very important, the second one, Arogya, that company, I feel like it addresses a much larger issue. And we've talked to people before in this podcast on AI and education, how that's very, very important. So I think the viewers out there, I feel like more high school students should adopt and use like platforms like yours, which could help them, especially like through their careers and as they go through their careers. And going to like the last point and the last concept of our episode today, how do you see your business or industry, especially the entrepreneurship, startups, AI, change in the next 5 years? And what would you tell a current student who wants to get ahead in their field?
Yeah. Next 5 years is going to be a whirlwind of changes. It's hard to predict what's actually going to happen, but things are going to change. So I think for anyone approaching education, college, career in this next 5 years, your goal is adaptability, not just any one skill. That's my feedback. Try to get really good at learning new skills. Like that's the skill that you want right now. We don't know how things are going to settle when the dust settles. I think the other thing that's important is that, at least from my perspective, AI it's not something that just came and is going away. It's going to stay, but I do think it's a bubble that will burst. So it's careful that even within AI, you focus on things that add value and that are not sort of the hype. What I mean by this is like, if your goal is to learn AI, be around AI, it's not critical that you're actually in tune with every single update. In fact, I actually think that's more of a distraction than something that's helpful. Instead, in its place, what I would recommend is pick like one type of AI. I'm even just saying like pick like ChatGPT or pick Claude and see how you can work with ChatGPT or Claude to improve yourself, educate yourself, do more yourself. And I know that sounds simple, like, oh, everybody uses ChatGPT. Like, yeah, but how many people are actually using it to improve themselves or to learn something new or to, go out and do something that they said they would never do, right? Like that's what I recommend you do. And yeah, I think, again, just be as adaptable as you can for the next 5 years, and chances are you'll come out on top. Are there any other facets to your question? I think I covered it. But...
Yeah. I mean, Abdul, if you have like any other, add-ons to that question, you pretty much answered my question.
Yeah, I think you covered it pretty well. It reminded me when you were talking about adaptability. It reminded me of this one book about how generalists are going to be pretty good compared to specialists in the next 5-10 years, and how like having that ability to sometimes like generalize in the sense that you can learn and adapt to new things instead of sometimes people get very specialized very quickly and kind of shut out everything else.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think AI is the generalist's best friend.
Right.
Like it really empowers you in ways that you couldn't before. I think one helpful way to think about AI is that it's a resource that for the most part is a commodity, right? Like, what I mean by that is like, you pay $20 per month and everyone gets access to this pretty powerful general intelligence. So what this tells me is that I have access to general intelligence, right? And that our future and anyone else in the future will also have access to general intelligence. And this requires that may not seem like that impactful of a statement, but it has a whole lot of meaning. It means that our future is going to be built upon something else doing a lot of general intelligent work. So we want to be positioning ourselves to be like, okay, how can I be productive in a world where other things are going to do generally intelligent work, right? Like that's sort of like the model that I operate in. And the ways that you would answer that is like by being a leader, by being a manager, by being a business owner. But very few answers are like by being a specialist in this one thing.
Right. Yeah.
You very much, I mean, it exists. And trust me, there's a whole swath of our world that we could not survive without, these people being specialists. But for the most part, like those specialists, even in a specialist example, a lot of their workflow will shift to this general intelligence. So I recommend you think of your career as, how do I be like the effective user of AI, or the effective like orchestrator of AI, because it is generally intelligent, but I am, uniquely intelligent, right? Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think, one of our previous people on the podcast, she said that, you need to kind of orchestrate, because you have almost, or at some point, you'll have a specialist on demand. You have someone who can tell you, or at least quite in-depth details about, specifics, if we get to a certain point in advancement in AI. So it becomes less valuable to have that level of specialization, and instead have the other skills, which you can then leverage that specialist on demand to do other things.
right, yeah. And I think I know we're tight on time. The other thing I would say is, for any early career folk prepping for the next 5 years, this has always been important, but I think it's even more important for you. You want to focus on building assets. Okay, so an asset is a company, an asset is real estate, an asset can also be knowledge, and you want to avoid liabilities. Avoid buying a car. Technically speaking, a job is a liability. You get taxed on it the same way you would. Although, go work, that's fine, because you're building the asset that's your knowledge. But you want to be hypercritical about building assets, even if it doesn't net you any money, because those assets are what's going to give you power and leverage in an AI world. And doing the opposite of it makes you vulnerable to the changes that come from AI. Right? So like, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to be a business owner, there's no one saying that it has to happen right now, right this second. But you could do a whole lot of building assets for yourself so that you can do that in your future. Yeah, right. That's also
Yeah. I think those are very great points. Everyone should know, people like me and Abdullah, and high school students, people that are coming out of college. I think those are very good points to use, and to understand and to take away. And I think this episode today was very insightful. You gave a lot of good points, and a unique career. You won't usually see this type of career, like changing from corporate to entrepreneurship. We haven't had that in our episodes yet, so I think this one will be a very interesting one for our viewers. Abdul, you have any other final comments?
I think, just as like a highlights of the episode, I think that focusing on like dealing with those failures early on, but then also like especially the mindset. I think one thing we mentioned a lot was like the difference in speed. We talked about that quite a bit, like iteration versus detail, and I think sometimes you can maybe apply that into not just work but other parts of your life as well, where you just want to iterate as fast as possible without getting stuck on minute detail. And it can push you to do things and start things that you maybe wouldn't have before, because you're waiting for them to be perfect, right, or for the perfect time. And I think at the end, like the assets versus liabilities, I think it's a great way to think about things. Of course, there's extremes on both ends, but generally avoiding liabilities, and generally, I mean, that's how you got your monthly expenses down to 300. I mean,
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And I know there's many things to learn, but understanding taxes is also a hack. Everyone's got to pay it, but you can make it work for you, and that gets into assets and liabilities. Yeah,
that's an asset in of itself, the knowledge of the
Yeah.
taxes. So I think today we had a great discussion. It was great having you on the podcast. In the
Thank
future,
you.
we'd be totally down to do even more about going into depth, maybe about specific trends in entrepreneurship, or we can go even deeper into some of your companies.
Yeah. No, I would love the opportunity to come back on again. So take a second to just thank you both. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. I really love what you're doing here with the Second Curve, and also just to each of you individually. I recognize you're both in high school, but I did not get that vibe at all. So I would say you're both very professional. You carry yourselves nicely, and been a pleasure speaking with you both today.
Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.